Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura kept his printing presses adjacent to the deities. The deities had an opening for the altar, and then the printing press was there as a worshipable object. Anasaktasya vishayan yatarham upayunjita nirbandha krishna sambandhe kamvairagya uchide. There's a way in which everything can be used, says Śrīla Goswami, and everything that it is used in Krishna's service is rightly used. Nothing should be left behind. And you all know, because we talked about it earlier and you've heard before, that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura told his disciple, Mahārāja that if you ever get money, print books. And when Śrīla Prabhupāda made his excursion to America, there was no money because there were no Indians. And there were only hippies at first. And they were selling Back to Godhead magazines for 25 cents. So there was ample prasadam and so forth, but there wasn't money for buying properties. And Prabhupada wanted a property. So all the devotees had been collecting as much as possible, and they pooled whatever they had collected to buy the first property in ISKCON, which was on Beacon Street in Boston. They were looking all over America. In fact, there was a competition between various leaders in America to see who could find the property first and realize the money that they needed to buy it. And so the devotees in Boston found a suitable property. Beacon Street is a harbinger name for what was to come, because Prabhupada, true to his vow to follow the order of his spiritual master, who said, if you ever get money, print books. The first money he ever got, he used all of it to buy that building in Boston. What's more, he also purchased printing press. And that was following in the footsteps of his Guru Mahārāja and the order that he received from him. At that time, Narayan, who was the builder in ISKCON, had to come to Boston to reinforce the floor of this old house, because the printing press, as you can see, this type of printing press is very heavy. And to move it in the house, they first had to reinforce the floor. Prabhupada had sent out about 12 devotees to New York. One of whom was Vaikuntanath Prabhu, who just passed away a couple weeks ago in San Francisco. He had told us about Prabhupada recruiting about 12 devotees, and he sent them into New York to apprentice, to learn how to run printing presses and learn how to do the whole press process. And he had them switch various tasks and jobs so that they could be well-rounded. And as soon as Prabhupada was able to buy the property on Beacon Street in Boston, move the printing press in, then he called those devotees there. And you'll find that the early printing of the books became a little troublesome. One of the Nectar Devotions that was produced there fell apart soon after. Printing is a very exacting process and not so easy for those who are just starting off. That was Prabhupada's foray into printing books himself, although he had done it extensively in India to print his books that he had written there. Obviously, and we've heard the stories of him struggling to get paper, which was not so easy to get. In fact, find that Prabhupada saved money. He didn't spend on himself. In fact, the person who used to print Prabhupada's Back to Godhead magazine in India said in an interview that he used to see Swamiji come and the paper would be on the rickshaw because it's in a big stool and it's heavy. So Prabhupada would walk and he'd have the paper right on the rickshaw. So when he'd arrive there, then they'd take down the paper, and that's what they would use to print Prabhupada's magazine, which he wrote himself. And then he also went through the whole publishing process himself. And so after establishing the printing press and having realized collectively that it was a huge job to do for those who were just neophytes in printing, Prabhupada moved to New York, moved the press to New York, and he moved the operation more into pre-press, because he found through some devotees that the best printing in the world was in Japan at that time, in a company named Dai Nippon, which is still there. And Prabhupada had made a deal with Dai Nippon. At that time, more and more Back to God magazines were needed, and at sometimes millions of Back to God magazines were going out within a few months. And Dai Nippon could see that Prabhupada was a big catch, because he had a growing movement around the world. There's going to be more and more need for printing for his organization. And Tamal Krishnamars explains how expertly Prabhupada negotiated a sweet deal with them, with promises that they would print more and more with Dai Nippon in the future. And also, he had to take a quota of Back to God magazines in the millions in order to cut the deal for him printing his big books. And you'll notice in Prabhupada's letters, if you go through it carefully, there is a sequence of letters in which Prabhupada is urging the devotees all over the world, or mostly in North America, to increase the number, not just urging them, he gave quotas to everybody. He said to Tamal Krishnamars, this is how many you have to do, and he'd tell others. And that was to keep up with the quota he had promised to Dai Nippon in Japan, so that he could keep the deal going. So Prabhupada was on a full court press when he got to America to follow the order of his spiritual master, if you ever get money print books. And he did whatever it took, getting his own printing press, training up his disciples how to print the books. And of course, he moved the whole operation out to Los Angeles so that everyone could be consolidated in one place. He needed the artists in one place and all the pre-press experts, so that all the resources can be used properly. And around 1975 is when Prabhupada printed the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Everyone knows the story, I'm sure, about how he had come there to Los Angeles, and he had called the worldwide GBC to come there too. It means he wanted all his leaders to be there, because he was going to make a point. And on a morning walk at Venice Beach, he had told the two leads for the BBC at that time, Rameshwar Prabhu and Radha Ballabha, that he wanted all of the Chaitanya Charitamritas that he had already translated to be published within 2 months. They had been upgrading all their equipment there and getting the most modern kind of stuff in order to print the books as fast as possible. And they had thought perhaps they could, and they were proud of this, finish it in about a year. And then Prabhupada said, no, it has to be 2 months. And that's when Rameshwar, on the beach, during the morning walk, after Prabhupada had stopped and demanded it in 2 months, said, it's impossible, Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada retorted, as everyone knows, impossible is a word used only in a fool's dictionary. And Rameshwar told me that Prabhupada said that, and then he walked off. And Rameshwar was standing there, he and Radha Ballabha, the two who had been charged to do this, and he said that he searched his soul, and as soon as he accepted the order, he said that's when he started feeling a flow of ideas coming into his mental system, as he described, where I think we can do it, but we need some concessions. So almost breathlessly, Rameshwar and Radha Ballabha caught up to Prabhupada on the beach and said, Prabhupada, we can do it, we're going to do it, but we need some concessions. So he met later in Prabhupada's room and asked for the concessions, topmost among which was, he said that instead of having just paintings for all these books, they need to also have photographs. Because what took the most time for printing Prabhupada's books was to get the paintings done. Every painting was a first-class oil painting by expert devotees and sometimes not so expert devotees. But Prabhupada wanted to okay each one of them. And he had to, those wasn't digital back then, so you couldn't just send a picture by email or through a digital medium. So Prabhupada would actually have to view the paintings and then okay them, and he was very particular about them. How long does it take to make a painting, and then to get it reviewed by Prabhupada, what to speak of the process for getting it printed so it could go in the book. So that, amongst various other concessions, Prabhupada granted one after another, granted, because he wanted the Chaitanya Charitamrita to come out. Partly because, as some have said, Professor Dimmock of Chicago, who was the foremost scholar at the time in Bengali, and Chaitanya Charitamrita was supposedly coming out with his own version of Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Prabhupada wanted to beat him to the punch. Nothing motivates an author as much as somebody else coming out with the same book around the same time to make you want to hit the deadline. So it's one of the reasons Prabhupada wanted to come out so fast. And just an anecdote to give a sense of the feeling of the time was Dhriti Dasi, who wasn't yet initiated. She was very young, but she was friends with devotees in New York City and had become close with them. She was a budding artist and very talented at the time she was a kid. And by the time she got in close with the devotees of New York, Prabhupada had asked them all to move to California to do this marathon for the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so she just went along with them. And when she walked into New Dwarka, the marathon for the Chaitanya Charitamrita had already started. And so, as soon as she got there, and everyone knew she could paint, they put her in her room and said, paint. And she painted pretty much nonstop. The marathon was there. People came in from many different temples just to help do the laundry and cook, so all the artists and those who were doing the pre-press could work around the clock 24 hours a day. They would just take a few hours rest and then we'd keep going. Sometimes artists would fall asleep at their easel and someone else would take the brush out of their hand and keep going. That's how it was going. So I asked Dhriti about her joining ISKCON. I said, did it seem like a lot of work? And she said, I had no idea because I had just joined. I thought this was what it was. Okay. And so then when Prabhupada left the planet, she said she suddenly realized that all the engagement she had was coming from him. And she wasn't engaged anymore because Prabhupada wasn't demanding so many paintings and more and more and more. And she became extremely forlorn. And in retrospect, she was seeing how fortunate she was to come into this almost a maelstrom of sacrifice for this higher cause of printing these books. And then how, when Prabhupada left, she realized it was all coming from him, his service. And then she felt bereft. So it's a symbol of how we can also appreciate how we're getting service. It comes down to us as a blessing. If we can take that and embrace it. And lucky for us if it can be in that same mode where we don't have a moment to think of anything else. A lifetime goes by like that, and one looks down and says, oh, I'm old. Or something's old, somebody is. But as Mahārāja was expressing today, whatever it is, next life, life after that, we'll still go on asking, where's that service? And it all starts with this printing press, because that was the main order that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta gave to Śrīla Prabhupāda, which he followed exactly. Every penny went for that, and everything was based As he said, his temples were bases from which devotees would go out to drop books like armies do, or air forces do during the war, like bombs, raining from the sky on the laps of Kanishka's soul. Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura ki jaya, Śrīla Prabhupāda ki jaya, go pray in the name. They're kicking us out.
Yeah.
Yes,
You don't have to go home, you can't stay here.